What is up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja. Unfortunately, a couple of months ago, we did have to talk about Sony laying a bunch of people off and unfortunately closing a video game studio as well. Now, fast forward to now, it is Microsoft's turn to ruin people's lives. And since I'm making this video, I obviously want to talk about it. So without further ado, let's rock. And I do have to admit that I do have a lot of hobbies. I dabble in a lot of things, way too many to list all of them in this particular video, but I am a huge pop culture nerd. I love movies, TV, comic books. I play a lot of Magic and board games. I'm also a pretty big sports fan, especially Chicago Bears and Pittsburgh Pirates, because apparently I'm a glutton for misery. But I'm also a big NFL draft nerd. I love fantasy football as well. Not to brag, but my fantasy football earnings from last season did buy me this new chair that I'm sitting in right now. But of course, my biggest hobby and the one that takes the most time is gaming. I love gaming. I started this channel a few years ago as a way to kind of channel my favorite hobby into something a little artistic. I get to write, perform, and produce content on my favorite hobby, gaming. And while I'd much prefer talking about Hades 2 some more, or the next great game that I'm playing, I'm very excited about Senua's Sacrifice. I think by the time this video comes out, that game will be coming out the following day, and I'm definitely gonna be making a video about that the following week about my experience playing that game. I'm very psyched for it, but unfortunately, there has been this growing trend of layoffs and studio closures recently in this industry, and I didn't feel like I could bury my head in the sand. I didn't want to do this channel a disservice by just completely ignoring that this is happening. The alarm bells have been going off for a while now. Like I said, this is my favorite hobby. It is the thing that I spend my most time on. So I felt like, again, I'd be doing this channel a disservice by not talking about it. It's been quietly going on for a while now, but it feels like the shit has really started hitting the fan this year. We've already talked on our previous video about the closure, or I guess the layoffs at EA and Sony, among others, and now we just got another big announcement. And that announcement is, unfortunately, Microsoft has closed several Bethesda game studios, including, among others, Arkane Austin, who most recently developed the disaster that was Redfall, Tango Gameworks, who made Hi-Fi Rush, as well as the Evil Within games, and Alpha Dog Games, which specializes in mobile games. Redfall will no longer receive the promised updates, including an offline mode and DLC. Will remain online to play, which is a good thing if you're a fan of Redfall, which I've talked about that game before on this channel. I wasn't a huge fan of, and many people weren't, but if you happen to be a fan of that game, it is good that you get to play it at least. I think there's a growing trend within gaming. It's not quite the scope of this particular video, that there are games that you have to be online to play, and then once the game server shut down, then you can't play that game anymore, and you paid full price or whatever you paid for it, and you can't even play it anymore. So I do think that that's good, at least that Redfall will remain online so you can play it. And Microsoft did state that they would make what they call a make good offer to anybody that pre-purchased the DLC, because you're not getting that DLC. Whatever that means, I don't know what a make good offer is. My guess is that they're just going to give you a full refund. So at least you have that. And there is some silver lining. Some members of Arkane Austin will be moving to other Bethesda studios, so that's good. Not everybody is losing their job. Also, Arkane Lyon, which I hope that I pronounced that correctly, that studio has survived the cuts as of right now, which for any Marvel fans out there, that is really good news, because they were the ones making the new Blade game. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say one closure or layoff is more or less important than another. I've said it before and I will say it again. If one layoff happens, that is a life-changing event for that one person. So I definitely do not want to lose that perspective. But I will say the move that shocked onlookers like myself the most was Tango Gameworks. the studio behind the Evil Within games, as well as Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush being a huge hit that literally came out of nowhere. And when I say out of nowhere, I mean it. It literally shadow dropped on Game Pass and PC. I mentioned my hobbies earlier, one that I didn't list because it kind of feels silly to say that you love music. Everybody loves music, but I have been obsessed with music since I was a little kid. My wife and I really bonded over just our love of emo music. We literally just got back from a Say Anything concert last night, so I'm a little under the weather because I'm old and I feel hungover. Just listening to loud music nowadays makes me feel hungover. But Hi-Fi Rush managed to mix some of my favorite two things, music and video games. The way that they made music a critical part of gameplay, especially the combat, was genius. The game is awesome. My only complaint really isn't the game's fault, it's mine. I'm your typical white guy who taps off beats, so the combat was way more difficult for me than it should have been. So for Microsoft to up and close the studio was a complete shock to not only fans of the game, which there are plenty. This game was so popular that, and we've talked about review bombs in the past and how I typically think they're stupid and I'm very anti-review bombing. But Hi-Fi Rush was so popular that after the news broke of the closure of Tango, people literally rushed out to its Steam page to review bomb. But instead of the typical negative reviews you would associate with a review bomb, people were actually leaving positive reviews of the game, which I thought was adorable. So obviously the game has its fans and they were left in shock, but the studio was also shocked by the news. It was reported by Bloomberg that Tango Gameworks had already pitched a sequel to Hi-Fi Rush and wanted to hire additional staff to develop said sequel. But unfortunately, Tango wasn't the only studio looking forward to their next game prior to getting shut down by Microsoft. Arkane Austin was looking to return to their roots with a new single-player immersive sim. To make matters worse, Xbox Game Studio exec told Bethesda staff that we need to make smaller games that give us prestige and rewards right after closing these studios, which of course runs counter to what they did with Tango Gameworks. Like I pointed out earlier, Hi-Fi Rush was a huge hit for Bethesda. It currently has an 87 rating on Metacritic based on the critic reviews and an 8.9 user score. Both are way above average. It also has overwhelmingly positive review score on Steam. Now, of course, that user score on Metacritic and Steam may be inflated a bit by the aforementioned positive review bombs. But even with that, gamers and critics alike adore this game. So my question is, what else is Xbox looking for as far as prestige? Either they are completely clueless or just full of shit. And I'm not sure which one is better. And I don't want this whole video just to be a total bummer, so I will try to sprinkle in some positive news. Positive may be a stretch in this case, but at least there's these tiny victories. The limited run games physical version of Hi-Fi Rush is still a go as of right now. There is still no release date that has been announced, but Limited Run Games has confirmed on Twitter that it is still a go. It has also received its latest and apparently final update on May 15th, so at least they didn't completely pull the plug immediately. I know that isn't much, but at least it's something. And kind of wrapping up, not only does it break my heart that people that probably busted their ass to get into this gaming industry that I love, an industry that, from what I heard, is not a super easy career to kind of get your foot in the door, that those people are losing their jobs. Hopefully, I think it kind of goes without saying that I hope that they bounce back and they get other jobs in this industry if they want to continue down this road. So obviously that breaks my heart, but it also breaks my heart that, again, kind of going back to what I said earlier, I have a lot of hobbies, but this is by far my favorite hobby. And to see this industry take another blow to creativity in the gaming space really sucks. It really bums me out. And I'm not going to sit here and be hyperbolic and say the sky is falling and the gaming industry as we know it is dying, because it's still a huge business. It's going to continue to grow. What I'm scared of is I don't like the way that it's currently growing. I don't like this trend. Yes, Redfall wasn't a very good game. I don't mean to shit on it, but I wasn't a huge fan of it. But you would assume games like Dishonored and Prey would let you have a little bit of a longer leash as a studio than just one bad game. If the standard moving forward is going to be, if you have one bad game that isn't successful financially, you're going to get shut down. There's not going to be any gaming studios left in like 10 years because nobody has 100% hit rate on games. Studios are going to put out stinkers every so often for whatever reason. But if a studio like Tango Gameworks that puts out a game that's as successful as Hi-Fi Rush, that doesn't make you bulletproof to these layoffs and closures. I don't know what would. And I get it. I'm a video game nerd. I like to get in the weeds about video game production. And from what I understand, it is very expensive to make a video game. It takes a very long time. It is a pretty big risk. Despite being a big business, it is still a pretty big risk to make a video game. But I do think there needs to be a balance between artistic integrity, making a good game, versus prioritizing profitability. There has to be a happy middle ground between those two things. And it just bums me out when a game like Hi-Fi Rush doesn't give you a longer leash. That we are starting to set the standard that if a game isn't uber successful and a studio like Tango Gameworks isn't bulletproof, then no studio is safe. And because of that, what studios are going to typically do is they're going to lean towards, and we're already kind of seeing this already, and I'm not shitting on sequels or remakes or anything like that. My favorite game last year was Spider-Man 2, obviously a remake. I'm a huge fan of what's Resident Evil's doing with the remakes, so I'm not shitting on those. But it's nice to kind of have a palate cleanser like a Hi-Fi Rush every so often. But if a studio like Tango Gameworks and Hi-Fi Rush get shut down, other studios see that and they're like, well, let's just keep pumping out sequels. Let's keep pumping out remakes. Let's have these live service games with these microtransactions. They're going to double down on what they consider sure things. And so if a game doesn't fall into one of those buckets, they're not going to take the risk of making it, because again, as we've seen recently with these layoffs and studio closures, it's kind of one and done at this point. And if you make one mistake, you're going to get shut down. And that just really bums me out. It's really sad to see that. But as I always say at the end of these videos, that is just my opinion. I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below. Of course, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash that like button, as the kids say. If you did enjoy it, which obviously you did if you've made it this far in the video, definitely consider subscribing. And if you do subscribe, ding that bell. That way you get notified every time I post another video. I try to post weekly gaming related content. I do, like I said earlier, have a Senua's Sacrifice video planned for next week. So if you like that type of content, definitely consider subscribing and dinging that bell. But until next video, take it easy. What's up, YouTube people? It's your boy Patty McNinja, and this is my boy Yoshi, aka Kitty Boy. And we were just talking, and we agree that since you made it this far in the video, you might as well subscribe. You wouldn't want to disappoint Kitty Boy, would you?